I have Morgan Imossi with me today, and I am getting back to my professional Rolodex. In the realm of healthcare, health, and wellness, I think there is something to be said about creating connections with like-minded humans and people who support one another's skill set. So I know for me in the movement space, having people to support clients that I have with their unique knowledge is so important. And nutrition has always been kind of the top of my list. So I don't want to say fave. I don't want to play faves, but kind of a fave. And so serendipitously, Morgan and I cross paths. Um, Not one source, but two sources connected us. And so I'm so excited that we were able to have a good chat and then jump in and talk a little bit more about what you do. So, Morgan, tell me about what you do, your business, your passions, whatever you want to share.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited just to be working together. This is such a good, like you said, connection of both of what we do. So, I am a functional nutritionist, which really means I like to look at the root cause of symptoms and health conditions and issues and kind of putting all the pieces together to get under the layer of just the diagnosis or the symptoms.
What does that mean? Why should we be concerned with that?
Yeah, so a way I like to think of it is if you had a cut and you put a Band-Aid on it, that cut could fester and get infected, and it might just continue to worsen and worsen and worsen. But because that Band-Aid's over it, you might not really get in to clean it out and, um, you know, fix it the proper way versus
Yeah.
just kind of masking it. So, something I like to do with people is getting to that root cause of, what's in the cut. Let's clean it out. Let's get in there. Let's investigate it. Let's shine some light on it. Let's put some air on it to really allow it to heal from the inside out versus just
Right.
kind of masking it with medications or diagnoses that don't really get to the root of what is the problem. So I like to treat the problem to really help people move forward from there in a meaningful
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, and I'm sure that when you would really take a deeper dive and you treat more intelligently rather than, making these little pit stops along the way as you're working with someone, if you can identify the biggest bang for your buck, the lowest hanging fruit, whatever the metaphor is, if you can call that out, your patient outcomes are going to be even more impactful, I would imagine.
Yeah, yes, exactly. So I tend to see people who maybe have sometimes been to a few different specialists and are getting either different answers or just all the pieces haven't really been put together properly. So part of what I do is help people put the pieces together and make sense of what's going on from them from a health perspective, both
Yeah,
with diet and lifestyle, how that plays into their health picture, but also stress and relationships and sleep. So really kind of
yeah.
looking at all the different faucets that pours into someone and optimizing them so that they can reach more of that good lane of health for them.
Sure. And I think you mentioned a really important point that health is multifaceted.
Yes.
And for me as a practitioner, connecting with people like you is so important because I can certainly create, movement sequences, support them in their, stress, wellness practices, their routines at home. But in order to have those really profound effects, we can weave in these other layers of health and wellness. And the food that we put in our body is also not only something that we can enjoy, but it
Yeah.
is also really important for things like our hormone health, for recovery from exercise, looking at chronic disease and whether we kind of look to try to reverse it a little bit or, stave it off if we have a family history. There's so much power in the food that we put in. And I find, and this is where I'm going to rely on your expertise, I find that a lot of humans that come through my door, we have a food conversation. I kind of scratch the surface level with what I know, but grocery stores can be really overwhelming. And I learned a few things way back in my basic nutrition classes. Stick to the outsides, don't go to the insides.
Yes.
That's where the processed foods are. One of the unique services that you have, which I think is really cool, is it takes the stress out of shopping. I used to love grocery shopping, and now it's stressful trying
Mhm.
to feed
Yeah.
different palates and food sensitivities. So if someone is like, it's just overwhelming for me to go into a grocery store, what might that experience look like if you say, you know what, let's reduce that layer of stress. Let's do this together. What would that look like?
Yeah, I love that you're asking this because this is one of my favorite services and I love to really customize it to the person. So, if you're, for example, coming to me for gut issues, I'm taking that into consideration as we're going around the grocery store and we're going to be looking at ingredients with minimal or items with minimal ingredient lists that don't have some of those emulsifiers or sugar alcohols or things that can really cause stomach upset or bloating or bowel issues. So really um, put
Maybe
what's the word I'm
customized.
looking for?
Yeah.
Customizing it.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
personalized.
Customizing it to the person. Um, and yeah, like incorporating a lot of those, some of those general things that you mentioned, like focusing on the perimeters, but also getting really specific based on what that person has going on
Yeah.
from both a taste preference perspective, if they're shopping for multiple people, taking into consideration easy things for them to prepare based on what their schedule looks like. Looking a lot, we spend a lot of time sometimes in the freezer aisle because that can be cost effective and really helpful for
Yeah.
busy nights and meal prep. So, yeah, just kind of like cutting through the nutrition noise that can be out there in terms of what's really beneficial for someone versus what's trending or, just might be really popular on social media.
Yeah, I love that concept of like the food noise. Like I live in it. And, I know for me what I need in my body and what my kids need and what foods might not agree so well with certain people. One eats meat, one doesn't eat meat. And it can be really overwhelming. And I don't know if you see this in your practice, but I certainly do in mine, that people are just like paralyzed by decisions. They're
Yeah.
faced with decisions all day long. And then when it comes to what's for dinner or meal planning or, fitting into a budget, they're just clocked out. They're
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would you
Yeah.
suggest to like a busy household, or, a tip that you can give with grocery shopping before they say, you know what, Morgan, you need to come and help me because I thought I knew what I was doing and this has just become way too stressful. Is there a tip that you can give maybe a family with multiple needs, or I don't know, what do you think would be a really good piece of info?
Yeah, I think just from a navigating the grocery store perspective, a tip I love to give is just the simpler, the better on ingredient lists. When in doubt, looking for smaller ingredient lists that have more names of foods that you can recognize. And then from more of like a meal planning perspective, something I love to tell clients is trying to come up with maybe like two or three safety meals that everyone loves that has some good quality ingredients, some healthy protein, some veggies, maybe some good fiber via like quinoa or sweet potatoes or some type of carb option that everybody likes. And having those just in your rotation because when the decision fatigue comes in or it's just getting towards the end of a busy day, sometimes that's the last thing you want to do is think about what am I going to make for dinner. So having two or three just like go-to meal options that you know how to make that are quick, that are easy, that have ingredients that are already in your pantry, your freezer can be really helpful for those situations.
Yeah, I've got one more question for you. What's the deal with protein? I mean, I know and appreciate the role of protein, but there's just a lot of nutrition noise, especially on social media, about, particularly women, you have to get your protein in. You're not eating enough protein. Like, what is the deal with protein? Why is it important? Is there anyone that needs to care about it more than others, or is it important for everybody?
So protein is important. I do think like so many of the things that get blown up on social media, we're maybe leaning a little too into the protein. Protein's super important, especially in your world for helping recovery after exercise, for supporting strength training and muscle building. It's the basis of so many important building blocks in our body. However, too much protein you can have too much of a good thing, right? We don't really need to be going super, super crazy with protein and that's all we eat. Something that I find that actually is really important but doesn't get talked about as much is fiber. And that's fruits and veggies, nuts and seeds, legumes like beans or quinoa. Those things actually, people tend to be under eating way more than protein, and they do a lot of important work in the body supporting your gut microbiome, which impacts everything about our health. Um, so yeah, that's kind of like the little quick summary on protein. It's important. It deserves a place on your plate, but
Yeah.
um, you don't need to be trying to force it down in protein shakes and protein bars and all the different, especially processed protein. I feel like a lot of people I see tend to overdo that, and sometimes we're reining back on that, adding in whole food protein, but then also looking at what else is on our plate.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's safe to say the traditional American diet is usually pretty decent with protein.
Yeah.
And if you look at a pie chart, isn't it the smallest percentage of what your total
Yeah,
calorie intake is? So there's so much, emphasis placed on it that it's just like, oh my gosh, am I not eating enough? And what's it
right,
going to do if I'm not eating
right.
enough? But it's at the end of the day, it's about balance, of
Yeah,
course,
yeah,
and the importance of, I would guess, minerals and, vitamins,
yeah,
fiber, so many other key players.
yes, yes,
Cool. Cool.
definitely.
Well, I don't want to put you on the spot, but is there anything else that you think is a one-liner when it comes to food, um, that you think is important for people to know? Like if you had the stage, the mic, and you only had 30 seconds to share something, is there anything that like comes to the top of your head that you're like, people need to know this?
One of my favorite quotes ever is by Michael Pollan, and it's eat real food, mostly plants, not too much. And I just think that surmises so much of what I talk about all day and kind of, looping into what we talked about earlier of just really focusing on whole food ingredients when you're in the grocery store. Just so much of our lives have really kind of gotten into that processed mode. And so peeling back and returning more to whole foods, and of course, incorporating protein as well. But whole foods really is just so much of what I help people to incorporate into their lifestyles more in an easy and delicious and attainable way.
Love that. And it's a process, not perfection.
Yes,
I think that's
absolutely.
important that
Yeah.
we're going to have good days and we're going to have amazing days. We really crushed it from
Yeah.
our food choices, and some days are not perfect, and the world keeps spinning, which is the best thing.
Totally. And like you see with exercise, it's consistency over the long term versus the day to day, You're gonna have your ups and downs, but getting back on the horse and finding a way for it to fit in your life in a way that's also enjoyable. Food and exercise should be sources of joy, not the opposite. So, yeah,
That's a
I love that.
great point. I love that. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to connect with you? I know you offer consultations, you do these
Yeah.
grocery tours, you do a lot more of a deeper exploration of nutrition. But if someone wanted to touch base with you and ask you more questions, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, the best way is just my direct email, which is my first name, Morgan.imossi@gmail.com.
Easy enough. I love that. And you see people online, in person,
Yep,
combination of
both
both?
virtually and in person.
Love
Yes.
it. That makes things so easy. I
Yeah.
appreciate your insights so much, Morgan. I'm so glad that we
Yeah,
crossed paths.
too.
And yeah, I think the universe has its way of connecting people, and I appreciate you and your work. Look forward to collaborating more with
Likewise.
you in the future. So thank you.
Yes.
Have an amazing afternoon.